Okay, so it's 9:30, and we're here in the green room in the United Nations headquarters in Nairobi. We are having an exciting environmental assembly of the United Nations, with UNEP completing 50 years of existence, with a lot of materials being showcased of where we came from since 1972, when the UN Environmental Program was established. Now, we're organizing here an event which is looking at the crossroads of sustainability, looking at climate change and health, but very much from the lens of urbanization, urban planning, and the roles of cities and how we can imagine a city in the post-COVID. Without losing much time, I want to welcome all the speakers one by one. We have two cities being presented, the mayor of Grenoble and the vice mayor of Fortaleza. We have a UN housing urban design program here next to me in the green room. Our colleague Naomi Willenhorst will present the incredible work that UN Habitat is doing, and we have a number of speakers talking about the role of urban design, the role of civil society, and the role of knowledge in the case of the Sustainable Cities program. So without much time given to me, I pass on to the message that our vice mayor from Fortaleza is providing us right now. Over to you.
Boa noite, bom dia a todos os participantes. Gostaria de saudar aqui José Chong, representante da ONU Habitat, Roberto Ciambetti, embaixador italiano para governos do clima e energia, Eric Prioli, prefeito de Grenoble, capital europeia verde, Jorge Abraão, diretor-geral do Instituto Cidades Sustentáveis, Arun Jain, chefe do departamento de design urbano da cidade de Belleville, em Washington, Estados Unidos, Anne-Marie, do Comitê de Desenvolvimento e Crises da Conferência Internacional de ONGs do Conselho Europeu, e Cláudio Ascioli, arquiteto, planejador urbano e consultor para organizações internacionais. Gostaria de agradecer o convite à cidade de Fortaleza para que pudéssemos participar nesse momento desse painel tratando de desenvolvimento urbano sustentável e considerando as lições de Fortaleza, aquilo que a cidade tem feito em relação ao tema do desenvolvimento urbano sustentável. Essa é uma foto da nossa cidade. A cidade de Fortaleza tem uma localização estratégica, tanto na América do Sul como dentro do Atlântico. Somos considerados um hub tecnológico, 16 cabos submarinos se conectam à nossa cidade e, a partir desse ponto de conectividade, a cidade de Fortaleza se conecta ao mundo e, portanto, os dados do mundo todo passam por esse ponto, que é a cidade de Fortaleza. Também somos a porta de entrada do Brasil e a porta de saída também do Brasil, no que diz respeito a voos internacionais. A nossa população é de 2,6 milhões de habitantes. Somos a quinta capital do país. Temos uma área de 315 quilômetros quadrados, uma densidade de 8,2 habitantes por quilômetros quadrados. É a primeira do Brasil. Temos um produto interno bruto de 17,3 bilhão de dólares. Temos uma cidade marcada pela desigualdade, com bairros com alto índice de desenvolvimento humano e outros bairros com um índice muito baixo de desenvolvimento humano. Temos um planejamento de longo prazo. Esse planejamento de longo prazo está articulado com a agenda dos objetivos do desenvolvimento sustentável, também está articulado com a nova agenda urbana e ele representa o Fortaleza 2040. justamente uma visão para que a cidade, em 2040, consiga alcançar um desenvolvimento urbano sustentável que tenha como resultado o equilíbrio entre natureza, economia e sociedade. Do ponto de vista da cidade e do planejamento, o Fortaleza 2040 se articula com um plano diretor participativo, e isso se traduz no plano plurianual, que é apresentado a cada 4 anos, na lei de diretrizes orçamentárias e na lei orçamentária anual. Tudo isso tem como resultado justamente a transformação econômica, digital, social e espacial da cidade de Fortaleza. Esse é o resultado que se quer alcançar em 2040 a partir dessa estratégia de planejamento. Do ponto de vista territorial, temos no planejamento a participação e o engajamento dos cidadãos. Isso funciona através de um ciclo permanente que une o Instituto de Planejamento de Fortaleza, câmaras setoriais, diagnósticos que são feitos pelo Instituto de Planejamento e que são discutidos em fóruns nos territórios da cidade. A cidade de Fortaleza foi dividida em 39 territórios e 12 regiões administrativas. Isso formam as pré-agendas que vão justamente fazer com que o plano e a visão de longo prazo da cidade entrem num processo dinâmico ao longo de todo o tempo, para que a gente tenha ações não só planejadas em relação ao futuro, mas que elas possam ser atualizadas de forma permanente. A agenda climática da cidade de Fortaleza, ela está relacionada diretamente com um conjunto de compromissos que a cidade vem assinando desde 2012 até o ano passado. O último a ser assinado foi justamente o Race to Zero, a corrida para zero, para que a cidade possa se planejar em relação ao futuro e possa mitigar e reduzir as emissões de gás carbônico. Portanto, a cidade está diretamente articulada com uma agenda que é do estado do Ceará, que é do Brasil, mas que é global. Temos adotado na cidade de Fortaleza soluções baseadas na natureza. Esse aqui é um exemplo do Parque Raquel de Queiroz, que está passando por uma grande transformação, no sentido de fazer com que uma área antes degradada da cidade agora seja plenamente utilizada por todos os cidadãos e cumpra não só uma função ambiental, mas também uma função de lazer e de entretenimento. Esse é um outro exemplo, chamados microparques urbanos, são pequenos espaços do território da cidade que antes estavam abandonados e que agora estão passando por um processo de qualificação. Temos investido bastante e a cidade de Fortaleza tem sido premiada justamente por conta do seu plano de mobilidade urbana sustentável. Esse aqui é um conjunto de ações relacionadas com o uso da bicicleta. Houve uma expansão da infraestrutura cicloviária. A cidade criou um programa chamado Bicicletar. Ele se articula com o sistema de ônibus e também com o metrô da cidade. E o reciclo, por exemplo, é uma das ações que tem a ver com a mobilidade sustentável e que se articula com os catadores na cidade de Fortaleza. A cidade saiu de aproximadamente 50 quilômetros de ciclovia e ciclofaixa em 2012 para aproximadamente 450 quilômetros em 2021. Temos também, dentro da mobilidade urbana sustentável, priorizado o transporte público, também o sistema de carros compartilhados, elétricos, e a criação de BRTs e BRS. Esse programa envolve também a priorização do pedestre, portanto, planos relacionados com calçadas, com vias mais seguras para crianças, para idosos, para jovens, para transeuntes em geral. Recentemente, a gente está discutindo e está planejando, estamos construindo um laboratório de desigualdade, Inequality Lab. Esse laboratório, ele terá por função e terá por característica trabalhar com censo de áreas vulneráveis da cidade, trabalhar com design urbano e com políticas públicas customizadas, personalizadas para os públicos mais vulneráveis da cidade. O Inequality Lab ficará hospedado dentro do Instituto de Planejamento da cidade de Fortaleza. Temos buscado também estabelecer conexões urbanas com outras cidades, tanto dentro do estado do Ceará, quanto dentro do Brasil, e estamos buscando nos articularmos com outras cidades no mundo. O objetivo é cooperar, criar rede de cidades, fazer com que o planejamento e as boas práticas possam ser disseminadas pelos territórios das cidades e com o uso de inteligência artificial, aproveitando o caminho que deveremos percorrer nesta década relacionada com as cidades inteligentes. Nosso grande objetivo é cooperar para inovar e inovar para que a gente possa alcançar o desenvolvimento urbano sustentável. A cidade de Fortaleza, ela tem uma ambição de longo prazo. Nos últimos anos, a gente tem buscado alinhar essa ambição de longo prazo tanto para dentro da prefeitura, quanto para o engajamento com o setor privado, com a sociedade civil organizada. E temos buscado também fazer com que essa ambição, esse alinhamento, possam convergir para um conjunto de ações que sejam transformadoras do território. Muito obrigado, um prazer participar desse momento e discutir um tema tão relevante e como é que as cidades podem aprender umas com as outras no que diz respeito às mudanças climáticas, mas também os problemas relacionados com a economia, com o meio ambiente e com a sociabilidade no século XXI.
Thank you very much. Very powerful message from a city in the northeast of Brazil by Vice Mayor Elcio Batista, who showed us how we tackle the environmental challenges that the planet is facing, but actually with an intervention with urban policies and a variety of programs. And without much from my side, let me pass now to Mrs. Naomi Hogevorst. She's an architect and urban planner, leading a very important area of work of UN Habitat, and now sharing with us what is that a UN agency is doing within this framework of sustainable urbanization. Over to you, Naomi.
Thank you very much, Claudio. Thank you, everyone online and in the room. And many thanks for the invitation to this event today. I'm going to try to share my screen. If you can give me hopefully 1 second. Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay, great. I hope you can all hear me well. Please let me know if not, then I can try to speak louder. So my name is Naomi Hogevorst. I'm acting chief of the Planning, Finance and Economy section. And that's falling under the Urban Practice branch at UN Habitat, where we develop, test and implement normative guidance and also operational projects. And we do that together with our partners on the ground in the countries and cities. And today I will discuss in this at the UNEA together with you the territorialization of the SDGs, a spatial approach to address climate change and health in cities. So I think maybe good to start with the opportunities. Cities are in the forefront of addressing those issues as climate change and also following the COVID pandemic. But there's a good opportunity to work together and help to articulate the challenges as mentioned here. Urban challenges on floods and drought, but also the social cohesion, which can be addressed at the same time. And I think it's important here at UNEA, where this Act for Nature is being discussed, that we also focus on the territorial approach in the cities where most of the people live. Transformative action can be done with our partners in the cities. As you can see, many challenges on low carbon cities, reductions can be achieved, but also, sorry, I'm missing a bit my slide, opportunities to be investing in green infrastructure, how to tackle at the same time key issues that are happening in cities. So that integrated approach is something that I would like to put forward during this presentation. And that is being led by our global agendas and priorities coming from the SDGs and the new urban agenda to help governments to actually localize the SDGs on the ground. And the frameworks related to climate change and increased cooperation to tackle those challenges. And I think cities are where most of the SDGs can be achieved, not only SDG 11, but there's a focus on sustainable cities and communities, but beyond that. And UN Habitat developed a strategic plan, which includes addressing climate change and also health and well-being. It's one of our flagship programs. And the work we've been doing on integrated health in urban and territorial planning started already way back, I think in 2016, with the World Health Organization as our key partner to address health in cities. And we, based on the report, we developed now a source book to help guiding a better understanding what's the importance of integrating health in urban and territorial planning, looking at this integrated approach again that planning can bring as a multi-sectoral approach. And it's important that there's practical tools and guidance how to act, when to act, and with whom are based in this source book. And it was actually launched in 2020 during the World Urban Forum in Abu Dhabi, when the COVID pandemic actually just started. So following that, an important piece of work has been developed, Cities and Pandemics Towards a More Just, Green and Healthy Future, developed by UN Habitat to respond to this pandemic crisis, to see how to gather evidence actually, to build a knowledge base, to come up with tool development, testing and application, capacity building, dissemination and partnerships, peer-to-peer learning to address the complex challenges that are now happening and can be addressed in sustainable urban development. And now there are steps taken to actually develop those partnerships, share peer-to-peer learning with the Healthy Cities Network in Europe to start with. Now maybe coming back a bit to the practices. So nature-based solutions is a key area of work that we are doing in planning and in their public space program at UN Habitat. And first, I want to focus a bit on the benefits of this public spaces designed through nature-based solutions and pre-infrastructure solutions to address not only heat islands, but it can also help bring in local economic development. And you can also see on the bottom, it's a sort of scalar approach. You can design public and green spaces, focusing on bringing people together. You can do that on neighborhood level and also on urban level. All together through a participatory approach, engaging the communities, and also to ensure that it's anchored in policy and planning. And it will bring us benefits to work on this together, on environmental, social, and economic benefits. As an example I mentioned before, when we are addressing flood protection, for example, through the design of a public space, it would be great if you can then also address social inclusion, attractive streetscapes, making sure that the infrastructure actually can reduce investment by coming up with the soft solutions, and actually green spaces have an evidence-based approach that the land value will increase. So think about the integrated approaches to focus on sustainable urban development related to climate change and health. So one of the tools that also were developed coming out of those exercises, the citywide public assessment, to support governments to come up with data on public spaces where a lot of the solutions can be found. It's about accessibility. Who in the city, you have an example here of Bamenda in Cameroon on the screen, who has the access, but also understanding the distribution of public spaces. You can see people can access green and public spaces within 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or are they actually, can they be better distributed? Of course, there's a sort of measurement of the quality of public space. There are clear guidelines on what is an appropriate amount of public space in a city, but moreover, focusing on quality. How are public spaces be used, managed? How can they bring in safety and green coverage in the city? And that citywide public assessment tool is also being tailored to address green and environmental issues. Here you can see on the right, Cameroon again, where public spaces are mapped against indicators on flooding. So which spaces are actually at risk, and how can public space design can help address disaster risk. I will speed up a bit to make sure that I can share all messages. Coming back to the SDGs, the Urban Lab developed the SDG project assessment tool for the Global Future Cities program in 19 cities, working together with the UK government. That SDG tool was developed to support project development in urban planning, resilience and mobility projects, ensuring that all SDGs are taken into account in the design of the project. And a good example is the Healthy Streets project in Ankara in Turkey. Together with all partners, the SDG framework was used to identify which SDGs and the indicators can be tackled through this project. And you can see here, SDG 11 is key, but also the goal on climate action and gender equality, 13 and 5. And that's being done through an approach looking at quality, technical aspects such as social inclusion, spatial planning, but also effectiveness aspects. How can those designs be implemented with the current capacity and governance frameworks in the cities? Here you can see examples of the design of ARUP, one of the private sector implementing partners working in Turkey, together with us on achieving sustainable urban development. And you can see this incremental design approach, bringing in more green into the cities, making sure mobility is sort of focusing on low carbon emissions and a healthy and well-being of the residents in the city.
Congratulations.
I hope I was on time. Thank you very much for your time, and here you can find the tools and resources that I just mentioned, and hope that we can be in touch and see how we can work together to address these challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Naomi. Quite interesting to see that we move from a city level to a global level and back to the city level. So the city of Fortaleza showed us how actually a municipal government can tackle a variety of global climate change impact at the city level. And UN Habitat comes with a very interesting, let's say, policy framework, mobilizing different stakeholders in the global level, but then bringing down through the Urban Lab and the Public Space Program, how to integrate these issues with toolkits, thinking about the spatial form of cities and how to ground the SDGs and create solutions, including bringing the nature into the solutions that include social inclusion, investments in infrastructure, and a better functioning urban environment. So we now move to an interesting level, which is the region of Veneto, and Mr. Roberto Ciambetti, who is president of the Regional Council of the region, but he's also an ambassador of the Global Covenants of Mayors on Climate and Energy. So over to you, Mr.
Egregi signori, sono Roberto Ciambetti, Presidente del Consiglio regionale del Veneto Vi parlo anche nelle vesti di ambasciatore per l'Italia del Patto dei Sindaci per il Clima e l'Ambiente, che raccoglie nella nostra nazione oltre 4.890 città e comuni, pari a più di 53 milioni di abitanti. La pandemia non è la causa, ma è uno degli effetti di un profondo mutamento epocale. Stiamo vivendo un punto di svolta nella storia dell'umanità come mai è avvenuto in precedenza. Anche per affrontare la svolta epocale che stiamo vivendo, premessa necessaria è il coinvolgimento delle autorità locali, che hanno avuto un ruolo imprescindibile anche durante la pandemia da Covid, ma che sono fondamentali anche nella riduzione di rischi di catastrofi e dello sviluppo della resilienza, nonché nell'avvio di politiche attive come quelle proposte dal Making Cities Resilient, promosso dall'Ufficio delle Nazioni Unite per la riduzione del rischio di catastrofi. A tal fine sono stato relatore di pareri espressi dal Comitato delle Regioni alla Commissione Europea per incrementare la cooperazione con l'adesione di standard operativi comuni nelle aree transfrontaliere, cioè tra Stati, per promuovere la cultura della prevenzione e adottare modelli operativi comuni, sia nella fase degli aiuti nel corso di eventuali catastrofi, sia soprattutto nella fase della prevenzione. Il principio è quello della sussidiarietà, solo coinvolgendo in prima persona regioni e città, cioè le autorità e le istituzioni locali che vivono a contatto col cittadino e dell'ambiente, si ottengono risultati efficienti ed economici. È in questo senso che sono stato promotore nella mia stessa regione di una legge che favorisce lo sviluppo dell'economia circolare e sostiene le aziende che si impegnano concretamente in questo processo di innovazione e di giustizia sociale. Essa si basa su un nuovo paradigma imperniato sull'efficienza dell'uso delle risorse, la gerarchia dei rifiuti, la capacità del recupero, la maggiore responsabilità di produttori e consumatori. L'uso di energia da fonti rinnovabili, il recupero di materie prime, dal riciclo possono innescare un circolo virtuoso di produzione e consumo responsabile, in grado di dare una risposta al pericolo reale di un dissesto e squilibrio ecologico irreversibili, a cui l'umanità sta andando incontro senza essere riuscita peraltro a sconfiggere la povertà. Le città sono il luogo ideale dello sviluppo di nuovi processi, come cercherò di spiegare, anche se il Covid all'apparenza ha messo in crisi questa funzione. In Africa lo scenario demografico è diverso, ma altrettanto complesso. Sarà infatti l'Africa ad avere un ruolo fondamentale nell'urbanistica del futuro, per via dell'esplosione demografica imparagonabile e a quella di altri continenti. Entro il 2050 il 57% della demografia globale interesserà l'Africa subsahariana, che arriverà a contenere il 23% della popolazione mondiale, 2,3 miliardi di persone circa. Il futuro del continente verrà determinato da cambiamenti demografici, economici, tecnologici, sociopolitici e ambientali. L'Africa, ma in realtà noi tutti, non dovremo affrontare un problema di spazi, ma di pianificazione urbana. Noi in Veneto ci siamo concentrati proprio su questo, varando un piano per il contenimento del consumo del suolo. Infatti, nonostante un'urbanizzazione concentrata crei opportunità tramite economie di agglomerazione e accesso al lavoro e ai servizi primari, essa genera anche problemi sociali. Sarà necessaria un'integrazione tra le performance economiche, sociali e ambientali delle città, sia attraverso processi di rivitalizzazione delle attuali metropoli, favorendo una crescita di nuovi centri sotto i 150.000 abitanti ben collegati, segnati da ampi spazi aperti che alleggeriscono il carico delle metropoli e offrono un modello policentrico supportato da infrastrutture e trasporti evoluti, lontano dalle baraccopoli che circondano il centro delle città. Per noi tutti devono essere centrali: 1. La gestione dell'urban sprawl. Tra il 1990 e il 2015 a livello del mondo l'occupazione di suolo ai fini urbani è cresciuta 1,5 volte più velocemente della popolazione. 2. la riduzione delle emissioni e dei consumi energetici, per i quali le città pesano rispettivamente il 70% e il 60% del totale mondiale. 3. Il miglioramento della capacità di gestione degli spazi urbani. Ciò è emerso nella pandemia, che ha rivelato come il problema delle città nel controllare il Covid fosse non la densità abitativa, ma bensì, come dicevo, il sovraffollamento di alcuni luoghi, in primis i trasporti. 4. L'aumento della qualità ambientale delle città. In Europa si stima che il 13% delle morti sono attribuiti alla bassa qualità ambientale della città. Più in generale vi è un tema di vivibilità della città, rispetto alla quale un punto di attenzione è la valorizzazione degli spazi aperti, aree verdi, le piazze altamente accessibili e diffusi, con la stragrande maggioranza della popolazione che risiede a walking distance. Accennavo alla necessità dei collegamenti, non solo quelli fisici, strade, piste ciclabili, ferrovie, canali navigabili, ma anche le autostrade informatiche. Non parliamo poi della telemedicina. Anche su questo tema mi sono impegnato personalmente, sia in ambito veneto sia in quello europeo, perché uno dei punti di maggiore innovazione e utilità nel contesto attuale è lo sviluppo della medicina territoriale, ovvero un tipo di organizzazione del sistema sanitario che si articola in una rete ramificata di servizi di base, legati al territorio e alla città e vicini alle persone, ospedali di comunità, consultori, centri di salute mentale, case di comunità, centri di prossimità. È un tipo di medicina che vede come essenziale la garanzia di questi servizi di qualità anche ai pazienti domiciliati, ovvero curati a casa propria e non in ospedale o in un'altra struttura simile, con una particolare attenzione a chi soffre di malattie croniche o multimorbilità. Concludo dicendo che le città post-Covid, la città del futuro e la nuova economia non devono ammettere il social dumping né il dumping ambientale, non possono ammettere violenze e soprusi e mai come oggi dovremmo puntare a una città che miri a contenere le diseguaglianze e abbattere lo scandaloso divario tra pochi ricchi e miliardi di cittadini poveri, come denunciano le Nazioni Unite. La pandemia, accrescendo le disparità socio-economiche, ha messo in luce una profonda contraddizione nel nostro modello di vita e parlo soprattutto del modello occidentale. Per anni abbiamo sperperato la nostra salute, vivendo con ritmi assurdi, cibandoci male, sacrificando i rapporti umani, in un mondo sempre più inquinato e violento. E tutto questo per raggiungere il benessere economico. La vera priorità è ritornare a mettere l'essere umano, i suoi veri bisogni, al centro delle politiche, oppure verremo travolti da mali ben peggiori di ogni virus. L'avidità, l'egoismo contro i quali gli unici vaccini sono l'intelligenza, il buonsenso, la scienza, cioè una cultura diffusa e aperta a tutti, capace di abbattere differenze di genere, riaffermando la necessaria solidarietà tra i popoli. Grazie e buon lavoro a tutti.
Thank you very much. Quite a powerful message from Mr. Roberto Ciambetti, who brought us back to the social and human capital, which is concentrated in cities, and what kind of approach we should think about in the post-COVID era, where he even brings some innovative solutions to use housing as a place of caring with what he called territorial medicine, but actually proposing different approaches towards the circular economy to tackle the pervasive process of inequality that manifests itself in the city. Now I pass the words to Mr. Eric Pioli, who is the mayor of Grenoble, the city who is now the Green European Capital, and he's also president of the International Observatory on Participatory Democracy. Over to you.
Hello, dear colleagues. Today to be part of this, as you said, Eric Piolle, so mayor of Grenoble. Grenoble is a city in the middle of the French Alps, roughly 160,000 inhabitants, and in an urban area of roughly 700,000 inhabitants. We call Grenoble and its territories, the watchmen of climate change, because here in the Alps, we've seen the effects of climate change for many years. We've seen melting the mountain glacier, we've seen landslides, biodiversity loss, and we've seen it for more haze. In the Alps, climate change is going crazy twice as fast as elsewhere. We are above 2 degrees already. And so it is a responsibility now to be twice as ambitious to cope with that. And to face these key challenges, we try to move fast and to move everywhere in all areas of urban management and urban planning. That's why we as well applied to be European Green Capital. We decided that in 2019 so that we can go one level up in our ambitious level and in our ability to gather everyone, all the stakeholders in the city behind a shared goal. We won this title, which is awarded by European Union, European Commission. So it was awarded in 2020, and for this year, 2022. So we will have this year 700 events take place all around environmental and social transitions. But for us, this title is much more than a recognition of what has been done in the past. It's really a key step to move forward and to go and to act faster, higher, stronger, to cope with the change that we need to do. This European Green Capital is based on 12 themes. So we do one by month to focus. And those themes are, for instance, air quality, urban mobility, waste management, biodiversity, housing, inequalities, energy, and so on and so forth. And we translate those 12 themes into 54 challenges, really operational challenges, which are an invitation for all the stakeholders of global territories, like companies, associations and NGOs, public institutions, but as well citizens, to commit on operational and tangible actions around those 12 themes around the year. And if we were chosen, maybe it's because we, since 2014, decided to act thanks to cross-cutting and pioneering policies in favor of urban ecology. In each field where we act, we do so. So we don't have a specific person or civil servant in charge of environmental issues in our organizational chart for the global municipality. Everybody actually is in charge in order to launch dynamics of change in many areas at the same time. So it's school, transport, housing, food, culture, of course, health, energy transition. And to give a few examples, for instance, the territory of Grenoble is committed to covering the needs of its inhabitants by providing 100% green and renewable energy. That means for us 0% fossil, 0% nuclear by the end of this year. So we launched 5 years ago, 6 years ago, a very large investment program, more than 120 million euros to cope with this objective, and we will reach this objective by the end of this year. In another area, for instance, we strongly promote new consumption habits. Why? Because half of our greenhouse production are produced here in Grenoble, but half of them are actually imported from what we buy, and so are produced elsewhere in the world. And that's why we try as well to act on mass consumption with strong and symbolic decision as well. Strong decision around building circular economy here and working on waste management and re-employment. But as well, we decided in 2015 to end the advertising in the streets, because we do think that it's advertising aggression in public space is actually one of the factors that contribute to this large consumption problem, and so contribute as well to what we import as green gas emission from elsewhere. To do so and to act fast, we try to look at in each area what were the most advanced cities. And so we took inspirations from cities and experience all over the world. We could give a few examples here. For instance, we became the French cycling capital because we were learning from the Danish and Swedish cities and how they developed their cycling networks. Or in another area, we created a limited traffic area thanks to the example of Turin, for instance, and Italian cities that made that years ago already. We decided to enlarge our pedestrian areas by looking at example of pedestrian cities in Spain, like Pontevedra, for instance, or Mediterranean cities. So everywhere, we try to look at what are the most advanced cities and to gather already this, to bring this framework here. And that's why as well, we launch every 2 years a biennial of cities in transition to exchange good practice and to welcome here more than 50 foreigners delegation last time, so that we can exchange on best practice, work, what doesn't work, and cope together with these challenges. Here, I would give two important messages this morning. One that I want to deliver as the president, as you said, of the IODP, the International Observatory of Participatory Democracy. And so this first message is about the fact that citizen participation is, to me, really the key to build resilient cities. And it's important to develop comprehensive approach to social and climate justice issues. And that's why, as well, we want this title of European Green Capital, because we really base our work on how we engage citizens and how we can change public policies as well, based on their experience and based on their usage. And so in global, we have talked about, obviously, radical changes, but in a pragmatic way, so never losing sight of feasibility for every citizen, knowing that we need to twist a little bit ourselves to change, obviously. Nothing great can be achieved without or against the inhabitants, and that's really why we say we can twist ourselves, but as well we can bring this public decision-making process back to the population, and especially nowadays during this COVID crisis that we are still facing. I think that's really a point for us during this crisis, to not lose this momentum with our inhabitants. And that's why we developed, for instance, a special citizen committee during this COVID crisis, to exchange with them and to look at what we can adapt and adopt as public policy to cope with this crisis. And we do so at every level, every day. And we try to find out, because it's never easy, and sometimes we try and test and fail, and so we just change. But to interest people and to go faster. Here we develop some public votation, we develop some participatory budget every year, but we develop as well open work sites and participatory constructions, and those one are quite interesting actually, because it's something really different. You can directly with your neighbors act to change the city, to create, build with your own hands, and public servants here are there to provide some skills and as well tools, so that we can, the neighborhoods and the environments can do themselves what they want. It's the same spirit where we develop the participatory revegetation program, where you can plant and take care of vegetable gardens, in public space, in little green space. And actually, we try now to turn more and more public green space, removing concrete where we can. And I think we will be in the next years, it will be one of the big development areas, removing concrete and bitumes to really go back to the land. And in each project led by the city, that's where really we focus on. As we were trying, I think we need to train ourselves. Obviously, it's not obvious. So it's general training for population and for us, administration and elected people. But it's really producing a great momentum year after years.
Mr. Eric,
yes,
we're coming to a really conclusion. So I would really ask, it's very exciting hearing you, all the things you're doing, but we need to conclude because we have a lineup of other events behind us. Okay, if you could just wrap up, please.
Okay, no problem. So maybe in 2 words, then my second message is that the approach of urban ecology that we have is to create pleasure about change. We face very difficult times, and we do think that positive imagination will build the city of tomorrow. So we base on acts, not that much on urgency and emergency of change, but really on our ability to create a new framework, new imagination. And that's really why I think we're successful to do so many change. And as well, for instance, in food and reducing meat consumption. We have now 2 vegetarian meals at school per week, and we continue to expand that, and going for now 60% of organic food and 95% for the very small kids. So that's where we look at, as well as the way we organize mobility. It's really redefining what is cool and fun versus what is bad habits. And this is a pleasure to change. I think that will drive really back our society to essentials, and we're able to cope with the key challenges we have to face. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Very powerful message from the mayor of Double, showing how the city is actually learning and getting inspiration for this exchange with other cities in Europe and elsewhere, and giving us 2 very important and powerful messages. You know, how can a city act faster, higher, and stronger? So one way is getting more citizens involved, participatory budget, participatory construction, and a very innovative approach to urban ecology, where many cities can learn from these practices that we see, and the very innovative approach on the 12 dimensions, from air quality to housing, energy, and creating this engagement throughout the year. Now, we're going to pass now to our message from the Brazilian Sustainable Cities Program. So I will have to do it from here because we had a problem with his video. So let's see without losing time. And here you go.
Hi, my name is Jorge Abraão. I work in the Sustainable Cities Institute in Brazil. And I would like to thank Anne-Marie and Claudio for the invitation and say that it's a pleasure to be here with my distinguished colleagues in this panel. First, it's always important to remember that one of the pillars of the sustainable development is peace. As if the problems we have in the world are no longer enough, a war arises. Unfortunately, we live this today. Our solidarity to the Ukrainian people. Problems like these are unpredictable, and local governments have limits facing geopolitical decisions. But there are predictable issues, and we must face them as health, climate change, and inequalities. In this case, the local government action is determinant for the construction of public policies and programs for the society. And the participation of civil society is very important too. The Sustainable Cities Institute tries to react to these issues by stimulating cities in the direction of the sustainable development. We work to understand the problems and propose solutions that transform the city. I will present two of our initiatives aimed at contributing to cities. They are the Sustainable Development Cities Index and one of the lessons of this pandemic is that cities must be prepared structurally to face the challenge. This requires an integrated view of the city that identifies its vulnerabilities and also its virtues. To stimulate the cities to have this integrated view, we launched the Sustainable Development Cities Index last year. We identify eight public indicators and relate with 17 SDGs. Then we can see what challenges the cities have in each SDG. Until then, a few mayors in Brazil had this integrated view of the city. With this, they can direct the investments to the most vulnerable issues. Then we will measure the progress of the city every year. I would like to show the index for you. I will share here. Here we can see the Sustainable Development Index of the cities. Each city has a score in this index, and we can see here. And this score is the average of the 17, the grade of the 17 SDGs. This city in Brazil, Morungaba, is the first one in 770 cities that are in our index. If we click in a index as the health, we can see the challenge that we have in this indicator. For instance, this indicator is of hospital beds, and there is the challenge that this city, Morungaba, has in this indicator. This is important for the mayor to see, and the investments that the city needs to do in each SDG and indicator. We have a ranking that the city can see in Brazil, and this stimulates the cities to go in this direction. Each year we see and we renew the index, and the cities can change its position. We can see the cities in Brazil. We have cities with very low sustainable development, and we can see that these cities are located in the north and northeast in Brazil, and we can cities with high and very high sustainable development, and they are more in the southwest, so the south and southwest in Brazil. We can see these regions and in which regions we need to invest more to have this more to put the inequality in our agenda. If you see the climate change is another very big problem in Brazil, we can see that São Félix do Xingu, a city located in Amazonia, the emissions of the city are the biggest emission in Brazil. It's more than São Paulo. São Félix do Xingu has about 130,000 people, and São Paulo has 12 million people. The difference between the per capita emissions is 106 times between these two cities. The challenge in São Félix do Xingu, you can see that is the deforestation and the livestock, and we need to create public policies to reduce these emissions in this city. Another important tool that we have is the Inequality Map. And another lesson that we learned in that pandemic is that reaches people differently. The pandemic reaches people differently depending on the place where they live. The poor neighborhoods were most affected than the rich neighborhoods. To answer the question where the problem of the city are located, we created the map of inequality, and I will try to show the map here. This is one example of the map. We have 50 indicators. This is one, the average age at death, and we can see that the average age of death in a rich district as Pinheiro is 81 years old around, and in a poor district, Cidade Tiradentes, is around 58 years. So we have there is a difference of 23 years of life within the same city, the most rich city in Latin America. Why? Because in this district, this poor rich district, the health, the education, the housing is precarious. And we need to have more public policies to reduce this inequality. When we compare this data with the pandemic, we can see that we have more death in the districts that have more problems. Cidade Tiradentes here has more death than, for instance, the rich districts. And for this, we are trying to have an advocacy to have more money, to have more investments in the poor districts in São Paulo. And we create a program, and the City Hall in the last year, and I think that was a victory for the civil society. In the last year, the city, sensitized by the map of inequality, created a public policy that identifies the districts that have more problems. So they create a district of the vulnerability index that can, and we can have the district with more vulnerables in São Paulo, and the budget will be we will have more investment in the most vulnerable districts in São Paulo. It's the first time that the City Hall has a policy to reduce the inequalities, investing more in the more vulnerable districts. We are trying to put this for all the cities in Brazil, and we are working to 214 cities in the last in Brazil with 52 million inhabitants in the cities. So these are some examples of actions for the times of post-COVID-19 that we are trying to do in Brazil. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jorge, for your important contribution. The Sustainable Cities Institute that is led by Jorge, he is really bringing a forward-looking and transformative work in Brazil by bringing knowledge and evidences to support decision-making connected to advocacy, which can lead to more efficiency in allocation of resources and responding to the incredible inequality that we find in Brazilian cities. So it's a very cutting edge work. And if before I pass the word to the next speakers, just wrapping up closely, we started with the city of Fortaleza, showing that they need to integrate several areas of urban development to create the idea of sustainability, bringing down investments that can bring more social inclusion, and creating public spaces that are conducive to a more cohesion in cities. And then we had UN Habitat showing various levels of intervention, from toolkits, from knowledge, capacity building, and then bringing down to really solutions with tools that are practical and that help cities to create more inclusive urban forms and social environment. With the mayor of Grenoble and the president of the Veneto region, we saw the importance how to connect different cities to learn from each other, create that movement of mayors, of city leaders that can actually tackle and make use of social and human capital that are concentrated in cities, and promote nature-based solutions. And I think the last presentation showed the importance of we knowing actually what is the impact of public policies on people and on the territory. So without much time on my side, let me pass the word to the next speaker, and that is our colleague Arun Jain, who is based in the US, and he will bring his presentation. Over to you, Arun.
Okay, thank you. Let me get this presentation going. Good morning, everyone in Nairobi, and greetings to everyone else in every other time zone. Let me just start by saying, you know, the last couple of weeks at the UN, the joint global statement from Stakeholders Forum and the open-ended Committee of Representatives, all of them, and looking at the world around us right now, I would suggest that I still have this huge problem and worry of how do we take all these different things we are so committed to doing and work on them together. And what I mean by that is that we are trying to look for consensus for meaningful and scaled action that can simultaneously address not just the climate, not just the environment, not just the quality of life, not just equity imbalances, not just food security, and not just, frankly, war now. We have to deal with all of them together. And I think the structural sort of issue there is looking at fundamental sort of reflexes on how we deal with inequity. So just as a quick example, within a few weeks of the Notre Dame Cathedral burning down, there was $835 million committed to fixing it. It was opened in 1345, so it's about 680 years old, I suppose. But in parallel, the very same year, we had about 7,000 square miles of Amazon forests that were on fire. Not all of them, but a big proportion of them. And these forests, as you may know, is 55 million years old. And the G7 found it appropriate to pledge 20 million to fix them. So there's a disproportionality there about how we are thinking about even the fundamentals. This is a primrose in Cape Town in South Africa, and the picture speaks for itself. You can look at the informal settlements and the densities on the right side of the page compared
Arun,
to...
Arun,
yes.
we're not seeing your screen, okay?
Oh, you're not? Oh my gosh. See it now?
Yeah.
All right, so I'll just jump to where you're seeing here. So this is a picture of inequity in South Africa. And basically the fundamental question that I would pose to or offer to all of you is that the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. And by future, I don't mean a positive future. I also mean the negative aspects and the challenges we face. They're not the same everywhere. And so because there's this inequity of distribution of both positive and negative, we have different opinions about what can be done at what time and to what intensity. So if we look at where we could be going in terms of our overall trajectories, I kind of see these four sort of contrasting aspects where we are just simply one step ahead of disaster, or we are on some sustainable path to a low capital world, or we're collapsing, meaning lots of local disasters and regional conflicts, and then we're in some form of transformation. And then what that essentially means is that, did I just lose everyone again? So the question really is, I'll put all of these up. And as you can suspect, we're kind of moving and oscillating between growth, meaning staying one step ahead of disaster, and local disasters and regional conflicts, and now even wars. And that is exceptionally troubling. Now, there's a lot of complex forces at play. There's inconsistencies between what citizens need and expect, what societies can or are trying to do, what technology is able or wants to do, and that's not in sync with what we need necessarily, and future-proofing, and how we actually go about building things. And that causes a considerable amount of things that we have to bridge. And of course, the drivers of decision-making are unfortunately not, we might know the science, we might know what to do from a technical and scientific point of view, but the impediments are governance systems, human nature and behavior, institutional habit and tradition, culture and personalities, and frankly, how we invest in finance. If you looked at SDG 11, and I won't dwell on this too much because Naomi brought this up, the whole idea of making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, and resilient and sustainable has very strong sort of threads that are cutting across all the other SDGs. So we need to make better decisions. And I'll just get to the sort of nut of a lot of the decision support systems that I've been working on around different parts of the world, and Palau and in the US and other countries. The fundamental attitude is that drives a lot of these customized decision support tools is that we want to create conditions in which no actor, no stakeholder can claim ignorance of both the situation and the consequences. So the lower picture you see down here is in Palau, where the reds are basically all the constrained areas and wetlands and things like that. And I'll dwell more on the upper one, which was done in Washington, DC, as a suburb of it. The basic model, and I'll put this all up on the screen, is that you've got environmental layers, and you can see the different layers, and they can grow and shrink depending on the local conditions. You've got man-made conditions, and then you've got a number of practical other realities, which here are called qualifiers, and they sort of create collectively a good picture of what you can and cannot do, what is fixed and what is flexible in that landscape. It's so if you looked at it in the context of this area in Maryland, and we mapped all the environmental constraints that were already legal, not just necessarily aspirational, we found that 60% of the land was constrained in one form or another. If you looked at the man-made sort of layers, which again you can see, which are things that we've imposed on the land, including things that we know that can't be changed, the area that's constrained is 62%. Now, if you combine these two, you would actually say, well, in one way or form, the entire landmass is 81% constrained. So the white areas you see there are 19% constrained. And if you put in some of the political realities of what cannot be touched, you're down to 15%. Now that's very important because basically when we keep talking about saying we need land for natural habitat, when we need land for human settlement, when we need land for agriculture, when we need land for a whole bunch of other factors in place, we have to start reconciling and understanding what we have and what we don't have to play with, and just how creative we have to be, or in other words, define the problem correctly. So that kind of composite just says on that you could start imposing ideas like bus rapid transit, or understanding where master planning has to occur, or looking at it in a more zoomed in section and saying, how are we underutilizing what we've already got? And how are we assessing whether a particular area that wants to be developed should or can or cannot be or should not be developed? So I'm going to end with the idea of thinking and doing differently. And there's three considerations. So one is of consolidation and reinforcement, meaning we have to develop strategies that consolidate and reinforce existing urban assets, and we put our heads in the sand kind of as a group, not just individually. The second one is we need strategies to manage crises. And basically, when we look at, and that means we have to develop preemptive and resilient urban design approaches to compensate for things we know and things we actually don't know, and setting up the stage for that. And the last one, these two girls are smiling. They're carrying water. They shouldn't be. They should be in school. This is an informal settlement in Delhi. But we need to integrate social and cultural infrastructure early in the planning and design of physical infrastructure in order to just basically create these compensatory mechanisms. So the absolute last slide here is that we've got to do better with integrated thinking and doing. And that means the world is increasingly complex and uncertain, and we need to have better ways to cope. We need to embrace the positive, and I mean positive disruptive forces at play, not the negative ones. And there are lots of positive disruptive forces. We need to collectively relearn the ability to dynamically adapt to the challenges of these uncertain futures. And frankly, the only way we can do that at this point is to be brave. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Arun. If you could unshare your screen, thank you very much. You brought us back to the different thinking and doing. And again, since the beginning of the session, talking about integrating various areas, and again, highlighting the issue of inequality and the need to have better decisions, for which we need better decision support tools, which seems to be a cross-cutting issue throughout the presentations. How do you, what kind of tools and what kind of instruments you use to benefit the knowledge and take the best decision for issues that are unfolding in the spatial physical territory of cities. Without much losing time, let me pass the word to my dear colleague, Anne-Marie Chavanon, who chaired the Committee on Environment and Health Cities of the Conference of INGOs of the Council of Europe. She has been a very active person and the one responsible for organizing this very rich event. Over to you, Anna-Marie.
Thank you, dear Claudio. And first, if you allow me to do so, I would like to thank you personally and to thank deeply all the speakers, very high-level speakers and very important presentations that will really remain important, and we will make our best to disseminate the content. So thank you to the presidents, to the mayors, to the UN Habitat director, and to you colleagues for being here. And so as Claudio said, I'm chairing a committee in the Council of Europe, and today you wouldn't understand if I didn't, like Georgie did just a while ago, if I ignored the current events and with involving 2 member states and many NGOs and colleagues, all the more that we are in a UN space under the motto peace, dignity, equality, and a healthy planet. And that to say, you know, that the chart and the preamble of the chart starts with the people determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, and you know all the other words: reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, dignity, and the worth of the person, equal rights for men and women, and nations, large cities and nations, large and small. So this charter was signed by the USSR in 1944, and in 1991, the day before Christmas, the president of the Russian Federation notified the UN Secretary General that membership of the USSR was being continued by the Russian Federation. We all know that there have been some exceptions to this commitment. And the Council of Europe, as you all know, was created after World War II to promote human rights and democracy. There are 47 countries, from Iceland and the Danish Greenland to Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Turkey. Ukraine became a state member in 1995, the Russian Federation 3 months later. And today we want to offer the support to bring our committee, of our NGOs to Ukraine, to our Ukrainian colleagues and their families, but also to our Russian colleagues, urban planners, architects, landscape architects, and all those with whom we have been working and who are certainly not willing what is happening today at the moment. So, ladies and gentlemen, I was supposed to say a few words about the citizens' expectation, but I sincerely don't think it's really necessary. Listening to all the interventions we had and seeing how Fortaleza, how Grenoble, how the UN Habitat, how also Georgie Abraham and Arun have designed and explained the way the inhabitants were really in the heart of the projects. So thank you for all this. We know that from all the expectation, of course, solidarity is one of the main springs of the response, and that the links and the key word, the very key word is trust. And this trust is, besides peace, it is the most fundamental need. All the rest, you told about it, you said, you answered to it, and Monsieur Piolle, the President Piolle, was particularly interesting and impressive, and I may move to Grenoble, but I want really to say that trust is essential so that democratic, environmental, economic, and social rights are really considered and respected. Thank you to all of you, really, dearly.
Thank you, Anna-Marie. Very good closing statement, highlighting two issues of solidarity and trust, which in a way is a fundamental principle when governments and people are engaging in creating sustainable urban development in cities where today we have the majority of the population living and struggling for a living. It's very interesting that we are in the context of a UN Environmental Assembly, where personally I've been very disturbed by the fact that very little is outspoken about urbanization, about the role of cities, how global planet problems can be solved at the local level, where local governments and citizens can engage in very creative solutions. And we saw here from UN agency, my colleague here next to me from UN Habitat, showing the effort that a particular agency makes to actually instrumentalize local governments to actually bring down to the ground transformative actions with tools, with knowledge and technical support. And we saw the Vice Mayor Elcio Batista and Mr. Roberto from Veneto and our mayor from Grenoble showing that there are many ways to address a fundamental issue that is emerging. And I think the presentation showed us the issue of inequality, the impact on quality of life, but also on people's life, but also in the environmental quality, air, mobility, emissions, heat islands, and so on. And the need to have very well-informed decision-making so that we can use the indicators and the knowledge that we acquire from processes on the ground and actually feed decisions that will maximize resources that are scarce. We know that local governments are scarce in resources, and we need to be very efficient in the use of the means and resources we have. I see here on the room that we do not have any pressure at the moment to leave our table, and I see that we still have, let's say, 10 minutes until someone will evict us from the table. So let me ask a question here to Naomi. After hearing all the presentation you've seen so far from mayors, vice mayors, professionals, an institute talking about sustainability and sustainable cities, and then Anna-Marie is speaking from a very solid institution about the need for solidarity and trust. What would be your takeaway? What would you say from the perspective of a UN agency that is talking about these things globally and locally?
Thanks, Claudia, for giving me the floor. Of course, a lot of thinking and not yet doing, Arun, came up, but I think for me, always good to hear from the ground, from cities, what is being done, how sort of the global ideas are being contextualized from global indicators that are being used on the ground to inform decisions, but also to use the frameworks like the European Green Capital to actually get more stakeholders involved in taking action. And I think for me, seeing what is happening across the world and the need for transformative action now, sort of how to scale it up. And that's what Arun Jain also mentioned. How can we meaningfully scale up the work that we're doing? And I think one of the things is action on the ground, but we need more people to share this message. So we are here at UNEA talking about the environmental challenges. And I hope that the discussion will also bring in other people, maybe not working on cities, in this room, and making sure that where most of the people live, action can be undertaken with all the disciplines, the expertise, and the people that we need to work together. So for me, sort of the partnerships, taking action, and scale up is important. And yeah, I think Anne-Shannon summarized it well. We need trust. We need to work together, come up with tangible results, so we start to trust each other more, and hopefully that can sort of spin off the changes needed.
Thank you very much. And I'm not sure if our mayor from Grenoble is still online with us. I see his connection. Are you still there with us? Mr. Eric, are you still with us or not? If not, let me ask you, Anna-Marie, since you were the last speaker, you heard all the approaches, and we saw a city of Fortaleza doing an incredible effort to integrate the global agendas in local agendas, and with very innovative issues to deal with serious things we know takes place in Brazilian cities, which is the inequality and the environmental impact. So the question is, can we wrap up this? So I'm giving you the floor to wrap up. Okay. So the other meeting is about to begin in 3 minutes. So you have 2 minutes to wrap up.
No, I think you did already in a very brilliant way. No, thank you only to all of you. I think everything was extremely coherent and complementary. And thank you.
Thank you, Anna-Marie. You've been great. And thanks to you, we managed to have this event. And I want to thank you all, the speakers and guests and the public that accompanied us. We thank you very much and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.